everyone. Today we're here to talk about Earth to Beer, a National Earth Day beer campaign making local impact. Earth Day is April 22nd, and I'm excited to be joined by Eric Steen of Earth to Beer. Eric, super excited to have you today and to learn more about Earth to Beer. So let's start really general, really high level, then dive deep. So what's the 60-second description of Earth to Beer?
Oh man, 60 seconds. Okay.
If we're in an elevator, I briefly
Yeah.
meet you. What are you going to tell me about this?
Earth to Beer is a national Earth Day beer campaign. We get brewers to make beer with environmentally responsible ingredients and to give back to environmental nonprofits. That's like
Okay.
20 seconds.
You did great. We're going to go way deeper in a moment, but now I really do want to learn more about you. And so, Eric, this isn't your first time using beer as a means to be better. So this is kind of a two-parter. The first question is, tell us a little bit about your ride, what it's been like to be in the beer industry, some of the things you have done, and a little bit about your previous projects that kind of contributed to this.
Yeah, sounds good. People in the beer industry might know me if they know about Beers Made by Walking. It's a project that I've been organizing for about 12 years now. Before being in the beer industry, I was just a beer fan, and I was writing a beer blog and things like that. I also had a strong interest in environmental education and in art, and I was an artist doing strange projects with beer, getting breweries to make beer inspired by artwork.
What was one of the strangest projects you did?
Well, I created illegal pop-up pubs in New York City where we would work with home brewers, and we would set up a bar, and we would serve like 20 different homebrewed beers and get people drunk and then shut the thing down 3 hours later. And yeah, so that was like, for art festivals and things like that. Yeah, those were good times. And then one time I had this, I had this curator ask me, hey, you want to do this project? I've been stewing on this project where brewers would go out on nature hikes and urban walks and then make beer with plants that we foraged. And so I told them about that, and they said, let's go for it. And that's how Beers Made by Walking was born. I worked with 8 home brewers in the city of Colorado Springs. We went on like 6 or 7 hikes that summer. We tapped the beers at a local tap room. And then the next year, I just decided to invite a few commercial breweries, some small breweries like Ska Brewing, Oscar Blues, New Belgium, Crooked Stave.
Really small breweries people haven't heard of.
Yeah. And surprisingly, they all said yes to it. And
hey, so, you might not know me, but do you want to go hiking in the woods to find weird things to put in your beer?
Yeah, exactly. They all said yes to it, and we had a Beers Made by Walking festival during the Great American Beer Fest, and now we've worked with a couple hundred breweries on this project, and that was like the start. What ended up happening is that proceeds from the beer would get donated to environmental nonprofits. So not only were we getting people outside, but we were starting to support conservation-based organizations. That project got me a job in Portland, Oregon at Hopworks Urban Brewery. They're really well known for sustainability. And at the time, they were making all organic beers. They started introducing salmon-safe beers, which, I'm sure we'll talk about what salmon-safe means a little bit later. But they also, launched the Patagonia Long Root Ale, Patagonia Provisions Long Root Ale while I was there. That's a beer that uses Kernza, a specialty grain that has a really long taproot. And it grows back every year, so you don't have to till the soil. So it stores carbon in the ground. I worked on a lot of conservation-based beer through a fantastic brewery that was already doing it. And then in 2018, I left to start my own marketing and communications studio, where I've been working on projects ever since. So, a few others. There's a program that I run here in Oregon called Cheers to the Land. and that is with the Oregon Agricultural Trust. And we invite 20 breweries and cideries to make beer featuring ingredients from Oregon farms, and that's to support the permanent protection of farmland in the state for a variety of reasons. That's really important, and yeah, that's going on 3 years now. Essentially, I know that I was thinking about Cheers to the Land and how awesome that project has been, and I realized we needed to have something for Earth Day, so that's how Earth to Beer was started.
So you got you to Earth to Beers, and you were inspired by, I guess, your constant work for us to all be better for our planet.
Yeah, yeah.
When did you first have the idea?
um, it was probably about a year ago. It was around Earth Day last year. I have a one of my clients here is called Earth Day Oregon, and they work with 100 nonprofits throughout the state. And my job is to get them as much media attention as possible. And it's a wild 6 weeks leading up to Earth Day for me. Um, but as that was happening, I was just thinking like, this is a really great model. Like I really like this a lot, and I think I would like to do something like this with breweries across the country, and not just have it like focused on one state.
So what was your next step? Once you realized you were going to do this, take it nationwide, what did you do, my friend?
I spent an insane amount of time. Sorry about using that word, but I used an unholy amount of time to find breweries. I researched about 4 or 5 thousand breweries and got their contact information, and put together a deck and started cold emailing breweries. So I got a ton. I got a ton of interest, but a lot of people who probably wanted to see this thing up and running before they started. And then I got 35 breweries who were like, you know what? This sounds pretty exciting. We'll go for it.
If you had to look at those 35 breweries who got involved, like how would you describe some of their cultures, some of their mentalities, some of their goals? Are there any, trends you're seeing or just takeaways you've seen in interacting with them?
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of them are definitely community focused in one way or another. There's Hot Plate out of Massachusetts, who's Latinx, you know, brewer, female owned, and they support their community in ways that I don't think many breweries are. Um, and and then all the way over on the West Coast, breweries who are based out of the Pacific Northwest, who are situated in, the area where some of the best hops in the country are grown. And they're thinking about what it means to source locally with all these great hop producers nearby. Um, but what I would say is, there's a range from large breweries to very, very small breweries, and then breweries who think about sustainability and think about environmentally responsible sourcing all the time, and breweries who haven't thought about it much. And so there's a range, and that's the goal of the program is to eventually get every brewery to whether or not they join on to Earth the Beer, but to get them to think about how they're sourcing and do things a little bit differently for
If
one beer.
everybody's just like 1% more mindful, it'll go a long way.
Yeah, exactly.
So that takes us back, so what is the problem? Why do we need Earth to Beer? Like, what do you hope to see that breweries take away with this? And as an industry as a whole, we gain?
Yeah, well, I mean, the problem is that beer is a really intensive product. It's intensive on the environment. The Brewers Association has this report that says that it takes 6 gallons of water to make a gallon of beer, and so that's just at the brewery itself. That's not like upstream where the ingredients are, and downstream from the brewery, with distribution and all that stuff. So it's you know it's important to think about like what's happening at the brewery, and it's important to think about, well, the brewery's it's going to be intensive on the environment, so how do I mitigate that with the people that I source from, with my packaging? How do I make sure that that people upstream, it's like credits almost, like if I can support people who are doing things the right way, because just by adding something into the world, I am causing problems, then maybe we can do the best that we can. You have to make things, right? We have to make things. We need to have fun. We need to eat. We need to drink. Like, it needs to happen. And so, how do we do it in a way that's responsible?
And so, what are some of the impacts you hope to make both upstream and downstream of the brewing process because of this?
Well, upstream, my goal is to make sure that farmers and suppliers, producers who are doing things the right way, get the support from the brewers and get introductions to brewers if they don't already have those, that will be long lasting. And then same thing downstream from the breweries, they're all supporting local environmental nonprofits local to them. So there's not like a single nonprofit that's getting all the donations here. Breweries are deciding what's important to them in their region, and then they're donating back to those organizations. And again, the goal is that the relationship with those environmental nonprofits will also be long lasting. And so we provide a lot of opportunities for them to have conversations with those nonprofits, and we provide some ideas to keep those conversations going.
So when it comes to the nonprofits that you see breweries donated to, how are they finding them? Like, are you giving recommendations of things to look for, or, is there a list that you kind of pass along to say, hey, these are organizations doing really good things in the space?
Yeah. Okay. So we have this, we created this 5-part virtual course for breweries. And one of them is how to have meaningful conversations early on with a nonprofit. But even before that, like if you're not sure where to start, there are opportunities for you to think about what is an environmental nonprofit in the first place. Like there's so many different types. There's conservation nonprofits who are working on protecting land or making sure that land doesn't get developed. There's organizations who are stewarding land once it's protected to bring it back to maybe a more natural habitat, or to make sure that it doesn't get destroyed. There's people who take people outside, which was a huge influence to me. Just getting outside and learning about the world changed my life, and that's why I do what I do, is because some nonprofit took the time to take me on a tour.
Tell us more about that. Let's go back in Eric Steen's time machine. When did that impact have on your life?
Yeah, that was so this was before Beers Made by Walking, and I went on a canoe trip down the Yukon River in the Yukon territories of Canada, and I spent 6 days outside, learning about what it means to leave no trace. There's a funny story where I didn't get it, like leave no trace. And I thought, like, well, I'll just wash my food in the river because the animals will eat it. And somebody told me not to do that, and I didn't get it and still did it anyway. Which, looking back, I don't do that sort of stuff now, but I just didn't know. And anyway, this person later made some comment as we were in a canoe together and said, oh, here's such and such a plant, and I don't remember what it was, but he said, I wonder what that would taste like in beer, because he knew I liked beer, and that just sort of started everything. Yeah, so I forget where we were, but
why all this is so important to you. So let's change it up a little bit, though. The beer industry, we've seen quite a bit of collaboration beers initiatives over the past few years. You've touched on it, but how is this really different than others we've seen?
Yeah, I think it is different, and I deeply respect Black is Beautiful, that really sort of paved the way for all sorts of wonderful campaigns, and I mean, I think that is like an extraordinary campaign that was so inspiring. And so this is definitely using that as inspiration, and I gained a lot of inspiration from that and from the native land collaboration as well. Um, and um, and so I tried to think, how is this going to be different, especially from native land project, and so I wanted to, one, start with like, what are the questions that breweries have that I could change up a little bit. Each brewery is making their own beer. There's not a set recipe. Each brewery gets to decide who they're supporting, which was, oh yeah, that's the question that you were asking me about, which I could get back to if you want. But each brewery decides who they're supporting, and then on top of that, we are providing a lot of materials and assets for breweries that I think are really helpful. So I'm like I'm a public relations and marketing person. So we created this 5-part virtual course that gives breweries tons and tons of information about like how I would approach local PR if I were them, and I give away all my secrets, and how you can do collaborative sales opportunities to get your beer into grocery stores, perhaps for an Earth Day display, when there might be other breweries who are trying to do the same thing in your state. With that in mind, we also created different labels for every brewery. So when you look at the beers, let's say there's 5 beers in the same state, they're not going to have the same label. The brewery's logo's on the front. There's different imagery, and the colors are different on every single label.
Cool.
So I really wanted to differentiate it in that way, and I wanted each brewery to feel like their beer was different if they had been selling to the same place.
Eric, are they all calling it Earth to Beer?
Yeah.
Do you give any recommendations on how they can create, use more environmentally responsible ingredients, or anything regarding the packaging? Like, what type of education do you provide along the way?
Yeah, we go through a lot of that in the course and in the initial meetings. There are so many opportunities, no matter where you are in the country. And so there's like organic certification, and that can be nearby where you are, but it could also be across the country. There's a salmon safe certification, which again, we'll talk about whenever you're ready. But
well, you know what? Now's a good time if we're using these terms. Just let's say the term, dive into it, because I don't know if everybody's familiar. So start with, we'll go with salmon safe. Tell everybody what that means, if you could.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of breweries order hops out of the Pacific Northwest already. Like probably most breweries in the country are ordering from Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And so what they should be aware of is that if you're going to support those farmers, you might as well be supporting the ones that have a salmon safe certification, because salmon safe is a certification that protects a key indicator species here in the Pacific Northwest. There are declining salmon runs, and what it means to be an indicator species is that if there are problems with the salmon, that means that upstream there are bad things happening, and downstream there are bad things happening. Like orcas are, killer whales are on the decline because salmon are on the decline, and that causes lots and lots of problems as you sort of like go down that line there. So farms can get this certification called Salmon Safe, and that what they do is they put buffers around streams to make sure that if there is any sort of pollutants that those get filtered. They also work to keep the water cold, because salmon require cold water to live. The certification means that you're not using certain chemicals. It means that you don't have certain types of metals on your property, and it means that you're not using tons of water and things like that. So Yakima Chief hops, Crosby hops, Indie hops, like a lot of hop distribution companies that are really well known have salmon safe certified hops, and brewers can just ask for those. So that's the sort of thing that I just present to a lot of the brewers is, if you're going to order out of the Pacific Northwest, ask for salmon safe. If you can do local, of course. Local is another option, because that immediately reduces carbon footprint, right? There's regenerative agriculture, um, for example, heirloom rustic ales is for Earth the Beer. They're using the very first bags from proximity malt from their new regenerative agriculture program. And so,
And that helps improve the soil health.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it addresses soil health, it addresses water, it addresses, it's a very holistic approach, whereas like organic sort of looks at soil health, Salmon Safe looks at water, regenerative looks at a multitude of things. And so, yeah, they're working with like small farm, Proximity is working with small farms across the country on this program. And there's also, I mean, there's so many different opportunities, and it's just a matter of finding them. One of my favorites is Sinagua malt out of Arizona, and Arizona Wilderness uses their malt all the time. They were started because the Nature Conservancy realized that the Verde River was having decreased water flows, and that was because of agriculture. So they created an economic model where farmers along the river, and this is like high desert, it's kind of too bad that there's farming there anyway, but because there's farming, they created an economic model where farmers could switch from super high intensive summer crops to winter barley, which isn't really pulling much water out of the river in the first place. And that has helped keep a lot of water in the river. So even though there's no certification on Sinagua malt, like it's regenerative, and it's really interesting. So there's lots of examples of things like that across the country. And we created a small but growing list of vendors who wanted to get in front of breweries. So there's like 12 craft maltsters. There's a few. There's a few different types of breweries, or a few different types of vendors. I mean, and a lot of them are offering discounts to brewers for this project, in the hopes of making sure that they have new relationships with brewers.
One of the things that I really like already in talking with you, yes, this is getting brewers to brew a beer, but there's also a huge education component, which I truly love. And you mentioned earlier that you have meetings. Are you meeting with each brewery that gets involved with Earth to Beer?
Most of them, yeah. There's a few who just you were like, yeah, no need to meet. Just send us everything, and like we read through all the materials and we're good. But I do, yeah, I do meet with most of the brewers.
So then you meet with the brewers, then are you referring to as a 5-part educational series, or what, like, what's the format
Yeah,
there?
yeah, and yeah. We created a virtual course, so it's not me giving the course, although that would probably be fun too. But I wanted to work out the kinks. So I mean, working with a podcast, like there's lots of ums and ahs, and you probably wish you could get rid of those. So by creating a course, I was able to get rid of all those ums and ahs.
No, I respect that. So, hopefully a lot of people listening today are going to want to move forward and, participate in Earth to Beer in future years. But, for those who aren't participating this year and are looking ahead to next year, are there three pieces of terminology we haven't discussed today that you think are important for people to know with regard to just simply being more sustainable and environmentally friendly?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what I would say, digitally printed cans. I don't know. I think that is a huge. Okay, I'm going to talk about digitally printed cans. I think
Good.
what I have realized is that there's not a lot of breweries who know about this yet, but it is absolutely the way of the future in the beer industry in terms of small breweries packaging their beer. There's conventionally printed cans. Everyone knows about those. You have like a limited color palette, 5 or 6 colors that you're using, but you have to order the cans by the truckload. That is the prohibitive issue for breweries. You got to order 220,000 cans or something like that. And so that is the reason why blank aluminum cans with the sticker label has become popular. And it is really amazing as the decline of glass set in and aluminum cans came into play. It's given breweries the opportunity to be flexible and nimble, to make small runs of beers and things like that. The only issue is, as we have learned over the years, is that those sticker labels are not recyclable at all, and they cause cans to go into landfill rather than to go to the recyclers, which is really, really tragic. And people don't know that, actually. And so you're supposed to take off the sticker label in order to recycle it. Well, here in Oregon, you have to scan a barcode in order to get your 10-cent deposit back, which means you're going to leave the sticker label on there. So digital cans solve this problem. It is not conventional canning. They use it. This is like printing a piece of paper through a printer at home. There's a place down the street from you that does it for you. It is like a full color printer, and they print them in small runs. So you could do like partial pallet runs and stuff like that. So it's a lot like having a sticker label, just you have a partial pallet of ready to go cans already. So we've partnered with Craft Canning and with CanWorks at Earth to Beer, and we've offered breweries a huge discount to use those cans for this campaign. So even if you're not on this campaign, like you should look at.
Yeah, these are just tips everybody can be better for the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Salmon Safe is the other one. That would be number 2 for me. Is if you're ordering hops out of the Pacific Northwest, check out Salmon Safe certification, and ask your distributor if you can get that, your supplier. Let's see, the third one, I don't know. I don't have one right off the top of my head, but I bet I could come up with one. Work with craft maltsters. Think about like how you can reduce water at your brewery. I'm not really sure though.
Well, with regard to being sustainable, a lot of solutions you offer, you don't have to be a large regional player like some of those unknown breweries you mentioned earlier today. You can be a small brewery and make things happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like another example that we used to talk about at Hopworks was, and I don't know what these are called, but on your walk-in coolers, instead of leaving that open all the time, if you're going to have it open, you should have like these big plastic drapes that come down. They're like 6-inch strips. Just put those down. That keeps like a lot of cold air in. It keeps a lot of warm air from coming into your walk-in cooler. And really is an affordable option for you. And so that's going to save energy, that saves you money, but it also is better for the environment, because you don't have to keep heating up you don't have to keep cooling down your walk-in cooler.
Yeah, and shout out to Full Steam Brewery in North Carolina, who I visited the other day. So many breweries have a massive garage door they just open and still blast AC from the tap room. They had exactly what you just said, separating the outdoors from indoors, so it worked on saving that.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of little things like that I think if brewers just sort of looked at what are all, if you had somebody who looked at all the little issues, there's lots of little solutions.
So we've talked a lot about the brewing side of things, what breweries can do, be more sustainable, eco-friendly, and things like that. But what about on the guest side, the consumer side? Why does this matter? What do you think they want to see, the guests who are coming into tap rooms and purchasing beer from the shelves?
Well, I mean, I hope and this is why we did it around Earth Day, but my hope is that people will more and more see the need for responsible sourcing in their beers, or at least local sourcing or things like that. People love to support local food, when they go shopping, they go to farmers markets and things like that. But when it comes to beer, we don't really think about that too much. Because I mean, beer is already, it's alcohol, right? It's not great for us. So, people think about organic and they think that it's healthy for them, but really it is more healthy for the environment. And that's why organic exists. It doesn't necessarily exist for you as a person. So if people start to understand that having breweries who are doing things the right way upstream from them, how important that is and how that supports their local economy, then I think that that's really one of the goals of Earth to Beer. And this gives breweries the opportunity to talk about that around a moment where everyone in the country and potentially everyone in the world is talking about what it means to be, quote, green, so yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. Putting this out there to the world, letting their fans know that they're being more green. What type of assets do you provide them, or messaging suggestions to kind of help spread the word on the campaign?
Yeah, we have all sorts of digital assets that make it easy for you. I provide a social media toolkit that gives advice on how you can word things. We run a social media influencer campaign as well, where we're going to have influencers across the country talking about this. And so that, in addition to a lot of the marketing tips that we give in the virtual course, I think really helps breweries think through this and doesn't leave them hanging. Like, how do we talk about, like, what do we do here? Yeah, I think that all those things really help a lot. But I think I want to say that, like, this isn't greenwashing to me, and this is something that people might have questions about. Is if a brewery's never thought about these things before, and all of a sudden they are for Earth Day, like, isn't that greenwashing? No, absolutely not. In my opinion, like, I am so thankful that a brewery wants to join this campaign if they've never done it before, because that's the goal, right? I'm an evangelist in a lot of ways, in that I want breweries to change how they are doing things. And if that means that it's just one time or it's just one time a year, like, that is better than never. So I'm all about it. And so I just, I kind of want to be clear on that. Like, this isn't just for breweries who are already doing a great job and they can pat themselves on the back one more time. This is for everyone.
Now, I want to dive a little bit deeper. It's too late to sign up for this year's, but one big thing about Earth to Beer is not necessarily just a one-time beer you're going to brew. It's going to become part of your mentality, especially what you learn from it. How can breweries who might be unable to brew the beer in 2024 get involved now? Are they able to kind of dive into the course? What are recommendations for them to start this moment?
Yeah, they can head to the website, earthtobeer.com, and that's earthtobeer.com. And there's a little form you can fill out, and you'll get in touch with me, and I've got information that I can send you. So that would be the simplest way to do it. And then the course actually is delivered, like, along a timeline, and I have this timeline of when you should be thinking about what, to make it easier for you, so that you're not there saying to yourself, as a brewer or as a marketing person, you're not saying, like, well, I think we should make the beer here. I think we need to get in touch with our nonprofit at this time. I just kind of lay it out for everyone. And I say, this is like an ideal time based on my experience. I would reach out to nonprofits then. I would do this then. I would do this then. And so I give lots of advice on when you should be doing what, and I sort of follow up with you to make sure that it's happening.
I bet you love those conversations with all the breweries across the country.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know how busy brewers get, especially in the summer, and a lot of stuff. You have a lot of great intentions, you have a lot of great ideas, and then all of a sudden, it's 2 weeks out, and like all the things that you wanted to do have to be crammed into like this short amount of time. So I try to make it easier for people.
So what's something you've learned, Eric, from having these conversations with brewers?
I mean, not to keep hammering home the salmon safe thing, but I was very surprised because I'm based in Oregon and we talk about it all the time. And I know I talk about it all the time. Like, I talk about this stuff all the time. I talk about it probably more. I'm probably annoying to people about it, but I think that most people here in Oregon, not most people, most brewers in Oregon and Washington, and even a lot in Idaho, like know what salmon safe certification is. And I was really surprised that even outside of those 3 states, one state removed, like they didn't know about it. That's an opportunity for the suppliers, for marketing purposes. But that was one thing I was really surprised at was how important this is to our region and how people didn't know about it. I was also surprised at how thoughtful people want to be and how people are. Like every brewery that I've talked to has deep relationships with nonprofits and really amazing community programs. And so, this is in a lot of ways, there are a number of breweries who are like, this is another thing. This is like another campaign when we already do our own things. And so absolutely, they don't need to join this, but I think in the future, I want to make it easier for them if they already have things in the works to make it easier for them to just attach this to it. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the conversations with the brewers and learning about all the deep relationships that they have with nonprofits.
So what are some of those nonprofits that you've really enjoyed breweries building relationships with? Are there any examples of ones that you've seen facilitate nice relationship with brewers that you can shout out?
Yeah, for sure. The Columbia Slough Watershed Council here in Portland, with Level Beer Company. Earth to Beer is just one way that they're supporting them throughout the year. The Columbia Slough Watershed Council, they have like science trivia nights or something like that at Level. I actually am not super familiar with like all the ways that they support them, but they sort of on a monthly basis support them. Let me look up a few, because obviously I am very familiar with what goes on the beer labels, and the information about the nonprofits goes on the beer labels, but there's a lot of sort of work that goes into talking about the ingredients and less so on the nonprofits. So let me pull up a few here and see if there's anything I can.
While you're doing that, let's talk about the beer label for a minute. I know you said there's some unique designs there. What information is on it that kind of tells the story of Earth to Beer?
Yeah, the labels are really, really great. I don't know if you are able, to check them out, but just search Earth to Beer on Instagram, and you'll see some of these labels. One, because the let's see, how do I talk about this? I haven't talked about the labels much. So because the labels, or because the breweries are all choosing their own environmental nonprofits, they're choosing their own recipes. I wanted to make sure that every brewery felt like their own region was being represented in some way, and so first off, the label has this like monument of, it's like a sculpture almost, and the world is like the centerpiece of this sculpture, and it's like on this pedestal. That's like the foreground, and then in the background, different regions have different illustrations. And so the Southwest has a completely different illustration with cacti and lizards and things like that than like the Northeast, which has waves and water and boats and animals that you'll see in the water and things like that. And so those are some of the like really cool, unique things about the label. The brewery logos on the front of the can as well, so people can see who you are, and all the colors are all different from each other as well.
That's great. Were you able to kind of come up with any of those nonprofits you wanted to shout out?
Yeah, totally. Headlands Brewing out of California has working with Alameda County Community Food Bank, which I think is really cool because that doesn't immediately shout like environmental nonprofit to me. However, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the United Nations, ending poverty and ending hunger are like really important parts of environmentalism, because all those things are inherently connected. And so if you've never checked out the United Nations Sustainability and Development Goals, there are 17 goals that the UN has put out that that they are working to solve across the world. And like gender equality is one of them. But then a lot of them are more traditional Earth Day type things, like protecting all life on land, life in water, things like that. Let's see. Moniker Brewing is working with Save the Bay out of Providence, Rhode Island, and they've actually teamed up with them to make a beer that celebrates the bay. They're using seawater in their beer, and they also are using oysters that come out of the bay there. And so, Save the Bay is a nonprofit that is working to conserve, protect, and keep the water clean and things like that. The Colorado River Alliance is actually a nonprofit that works along the Colorado River, but Oddwood Brewing is based out of Austin, Texas. And so the river runs through Texas, just kind of slashes all the way through the state there. And so they're working on working with like private landowners in that area to put like buffers around the stream to make sure the water stays cold, to make sure that the water is not polluted, and to make sure that that water stays in the river as well. So there's a lot of cool stuff like that. Billion Oyster Project is another sort of bay-focused conservation nonprofit that Strong Rope Brewing out of Brooklyn, New York is working with. Yeah, there's some fantastic ones.
Oh, a lot of really good ideas and inspiration there. So breweries can learn, they can reach out to you, they can think about getting involved next year. So for you and the initiative, like how do you plan to measure the long-term effectiveness and sustainability that Earth to Beer brings into the industry?
I think that'll evolve over time. Right now, one of the ways that I'm measuring it is with cash donations to the nonprofits, and that's the thing is when I talk about donating to nonprofits downstream from the breweries, I mean cash donations, and so we have minimum amounts that we're asking breweries to donate. It's not like a percent of your proceeds, because that could mean anything, so there are minimum amounts that we ask. And so that's one way that I'm looking at success in terms of actual impact to the nonprofits themselves. But I think I eventually want to get really granular with like how much water did we help save? If we have 200 nonprofit or 200 breweries that join, like try to figure out all the ways that they, are helping protect the planet, and then quantify those, in some way. But we're not there quite yet.
You'll get there. I mean, I love the message, and I love how focused this is on education and about the long-term goals that you have. So one thing I would like to learn about is who are some of the partners you all have engaged with to help make this possible?
Yeah, well, I mentioned Craft Canning and CanWorks. They were big supporters, and we may eventually put stronger guidelines on what kind of if you're going to can your beer, like what you can use. And so Craft and CanWorks. There's Arrived. They were big supporters of the Black is Beautiful campaign as well. And then Yakima Chief Hops. They were a supporter of the campaign and offered a discount to brewers for Salmon Safe certified hops. And then Salmon Safe was also a partner in a way, not through cash, but just with because I believe in what they're doing. So I want to be upfront about that. Like they're a partner in that they helped me make a lot of connections, but they didn't support with cash. So there's no like conflict of interest there. I believe in what they're doing, and I think it's super important for our region.
Now, Eric, you've got me curious because you've mentioned quite a few neat little places that you've traveled over your life, and you obviously love a good hike. Do you have that one favorite hike and or state park, national park that is your special place?
Yeah, probably. I mean, the national parks are all amazing. I don't think I've ever been blown away by anything quite like Glacier National Park in Montana. It's very, it gets very busy there, but it is that place is extraordinary. And yeah, I there are some amazing hikes. I don't remember their names, but it's sort of on the far side or on the eastern side of the park there. Those are beautiful. And then in Colorado, probably the most fun I had was hiking to the top of Pikes Peak. And then you sort of camp out at a lodge along the way, and they serve you spaghetti. You get like carbo loaded, and you can have spaghetti, and then the next day you walk up the mountain. That's a good accessible. I mean, accessible. I'd say that most people could do that hike. It would be very difficult for most people who can hike to hike it, but it's good to like try it out.
I'm at a new chapter in my hiking life. I used to, when I was first getting my wife into hiking, I could get her up to 6 miles. Then we decided to have a kid, and he's now 4.5 years old. So I've told myself 3 miles is what we're looking at right now. But we were outside of Boone, North Carolina the other day, and we did a waterfall hike, and we pretty steep, a little more strenuous. We inspected the first mile and a half. And I learned the true challenges of carrying a 4.5-year-old who weighs 41 pounds back for over a mile. So different kinds of hikes these days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I've got a 2.5-year-old. I'm sure that a lot of our listeners have young kids, and it completely changes your ability to get outside and to do things. And yeah, I am looking forward to the day where I could go on some real hikes as well with my son. And for now, I have to I have to leave my family in order to go on the hikes that I want to go on, so I don't get to do them that often. But this is another reason why, like, the UN has this, these 17 development goals, the sustainability development goals, is women's rights and gender equality and things like that. Like, women historically and typically are the ones who like are taking care of the kids, but they don't get to go outside as often and enjoy the outdoors and things like that. But it shouldn't be that way. And actually, women do a lot more for the environment than men do. So we need to make sure that women are supported and protected. And anyway, that's a whole nother story, but it ties into the UN Sustainability Development Goals. So I just wanted to say it out loud.
No, I love sharing that. So look into your little one. I'm surprised you haven't got one of the ways you can wear him on your back or somehow on the chest. You haven't invested in that yet?
I do have one of those, but my son is in 99 percentile for height, weight, and head size. So you said your 4.5-year-old is 41 pounds. My 2.5-year-old is about 38 pounds. And so it's hard.
So you're already where I'm at. It takes a lot of extra weight on those hikes.
Most people look at him and they're like, "What? Why is your 4-year-old acting like this?" I'm like, "He's not 4." That's why.
Well, I'm sure you're going to pass along your love for the outdoors and taking care of our planet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Eric, is there anything else people should know that we haven't talked about with regards to Earth to Beer initiative?
I don't think so. If this sounds interesting to you at all, just earthtobeer.com and send me an email or forget if we have an email or a form that you fill out, but do one of those things. Eric at earthtobeer.com, ERIC at earthtobeer.com.
Well, Eric, it's been great chatting with you. I hope we get to share a pint eventually. I look forward to seeing more and more breweries getting involved and being better for our planet. And I really appreciate you. So have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, you